Thank you. I'm never stuck for a question. Chris McIntosh, and I'm a ridge dweller from Thornley, which might be a good scenario, might not. My question is probably to Jenny and maybe to Andy, but it's this dialectic I have between climate change versus weather change and weather impacts. In one scenario, you might say, well, yes, we've got climate change, and maybe we can grow bananas in Sydney instead of the normal cut-off, which was Port Macquarie. That is, are we going to become more subtropical as it warms, and so we'll have higher rain, high humidity, but maybe not with greater fire danger? Or are we going to have a bit of both? That is, we've got climate change, meaning the east coast of Australia might have the southern migration of subtropical climate coming into temperate, but it's going to be punctuated by more extreme weather events. And it's that flip-flop that I wrestle with.
So the answer is all and more. So I don't like... So there are people who describe climate change by it'll be like it currently is 100 kilometres north. You know, we'll just see a gentle shift of the climate southward. I don't think that's what we're going to look at all. We're completely changing the gradient between the ocean and the land. We're changing the temperature gradients across the land from the coast to further inland. We're changing the dynamics of the way the ocean couples with the atmosphere. We're changing the way that the ocean currents move energy in and around the ocean circulations. So we're looking at profound changes in the basic baseline physics of the climate. And what that will translate to, in a broad sense, is the kind of results I talked about from NARCLIM and the Minister mentioned in his speech. But the detail, the actual detail of what it will look like, remains beyond our capability, hence the value of resilience in our planning systems that the Minister talked to. So I don't like an analogy approach. I think it's just going to be different, hotter, more extremes, and that is going to test our capability to cope with it.
From my point of view, the way that we can deal with these possibilities, we don't have certainty around climate change on the very local scale, is for local government to be as flexible and adaptable as it can be in its policies. And what has been written into our climate change adaptation policy is virtually a continual review of the science and a modification of the policy as the science better informs us.
Thank you. My name is Rupashi, and I guess I have this question open to the entire forum. When we talk about climate change, we usually discuss local governments and local businesses as the most important players in adapting to climate change. Whereas the only prescriptions that you have for a regular citizen is, use less air conditioning or sustainable do-it-yourself projects. But realistically speaking, how can civil society help in adapting an entire structure that is essentially adversely responding to climate change? How can we participate in developing a structure that is moving in a positive way?
I'd love to have a go at starting off. One of my favourite tomes is by a bloke called John Ralston Saul, who talks about the unconscious civilization, and effectively he's saying that we fail to make choices. We basically get marketed at, and we do what we're told to do. So I think the answer is we do need a stronger discourse about these sorts of things. We do need more people to act consciously. So whether that's in relation to energy use, whether that's in relation to consumption patterns. I mean, as Planning Minister, I have to respond to the fact that we have a society that wants bigger and bigger homes. And it seems to me, there was a fellow called Arthur Morris who started the arts and crafts movement in Britain at the turn of the last century. And he said there are two questions when making any purchase or any acquisition. He said, ask, is it beautiful and is it useful? Now, I think today we ask two questions as well. We say, is it big, is it cheap? We need to start asking the right questions as a society and being conscious, because in one sense, decisions by government, we merely and appropriately, as a democratic society, reflect the society that elects us. And so society needs to be more involved in these debates.
Just touching on what Rob was saying, it's think of yourself as having your own supply chain. Okay, I talked about Fuji Xerox impacting natural capital. You do as well as a consumer. So it's not just about your direct energy use, it's about everything you buy, the clothes you wear, the food you buy, the car you drive. That all has a supply chain. As a consumer, you vote when you buy. Okay, so when you spend your money, you're voting for the system that supports the product that you just bought. So if what we're trying to do is actually deliver a product that's more sustainable, so when people use us, they're voting for our product, they're more sustainable. It's up to you as a consumer to make that decision when you go to buy. How do I know this is this hasn't been produced in poor labour standards overseas? How do I know that this isn't energy intensive? Those externalities which I referred to, natural capital. How do I know that the true cost of this product doesn't basically exceed the fact that I'm paying a discounted price at the retail outlet? So yeah, that's a responsibility as a consumer, and of course there's a producer responsibility as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you very much for Fuji for actually coming here and being 100% honest. It's not very often you hear big business actually saying, we pollute, we do this, we do the other. I've got a lot of questions. I'll email them to the Minister if he promises to answer them. Professor Pittman, we see Yemen is starting to go on par in terms of dramatic weather and drying out. They are down to Australia. They are down to 100 metres or so for tapping the underground aquifers and water to take, autocorrect is changing my words. They're accelerating and they will overtake us and become the first country to become completely dry. What does the data state for Australia? How long before it will become, if we don't do anything, how long will it become the Sunberg country if we keep using city planning ideas of tapping bore water and tapping aquifers instead of utilising what was stated 100 years ago to utilise more wetlands and more natural water resources? If that makes sense.
I don't know. It depends where you are, it depends on the nature of the aquifer, it depends on how fast it's tapped, it depends on whether it's one of the aquifers that was recharged by East Coast lows or whether it's one of the ancient aquifers that was filled at the end of the last ice age. It just depends. But efficient use of water has to be a good idea. And I know there's a lot of investment, I think state and federally, in optimising use of water. And that has to be a good idea. That's good planning. It's good resource management. I think an awful lot of the ways that we deal with climate change can be addressed by good planning, and it's rare that I find somebody who's got a tougher sell than a climate scientist, but the Minister clearly has a tougher job in dealing with some of the issues. I'm stunned by that population figure that you gave us. House prices should not stabilise in the near future. So I think it's about planning and it's about efficient resource use, but I think that's a good thing to be doing for an economy, for the environment in any case. So I'm not sure it's kind of rocket science, but when Australia will dry out?
Hi, my name's Alex. I got a question for Rob Stokes as Planning Minister. There's currently a bill before the Senate which looks like it's going to be making a number of changes to the, the objector appeal and merits appeal processes to large state significant projects. Like the Warkworth coal mine and things that are going to have a significant impact on climate change in Australia's future. So as Planning Minister, how do you plan to address the impacts, especially indirect impacts related to emissions, when giving approval or looking at approval for these kind of projects?
Well, certainly the factors the decision makers are required to take into account are those outlined in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. I have spoken quite strongly about the need to ensure that we do not walk away from the concept of ecologically sustainable development. In fact, I think we need to consider ways in which we can effectively operationalise it. It sits in legislation as an objective, but it's not very clear from that legislation when applied by decision makers, whether they be delegated decision makers in the specified instances where the minister is still a decision maker, or where that decision maker is the court. It's not very clear from the legislation as to what that actually means in an operational sense. There are plenty of things that we do and plenty of activities of development that are inherently unsustainable, yet we haven't figured out better ways yet of meeting social and economic needs in ways that are also environmentally sustainable. So at this stage it sits out as a goal, as an objective that we are aiming towards. My ambition is to work to ways in which in future legislation we can seek to operationalise ESD and actually put some definitions under it as to what it means. But having said that, it'll clearly still be a balance, and that balance will depend from project to project, and it will be a bit of an uncertain science because it will depend on a huge range of factors, and the fact that we are getting better at reporting on things like likely environmental impacts doesn't actually make the job of decision makers easier. It makes it more difficult because then you've got to assess more factors. There are more variables in decision making. So I don't have a clear answer, but it needs to be an objective as a society we are aiming towards.
Tim, really excited about what Fuji Xerox is doing, and I think it's amazing how it's just not carbon neutral but resource neutral as well. Just wondering, into the future, we're kind of looking at symptoms, not the causes, and causes is big business creating sort of world-destroying products. Just wondering how in the future can we regulate against that and make sure other companies can take that more resource neutral ideology.
No, good question. And yes, big business does have a huge responsibility for what we're seeing today in the science. It also has the opportunity to probably affect it the most and change the fastest if the will is there within the business and if the will is there within the stakeholders that are talking to that business. So what I talked about before was natural capital. That needs to be factored into the decision making of the business. At the moment, it sits external to their profit and loss statement. It sits external to the formal economy. That actually needs to be brought in to the decision making process. It needs to be given value, and this is not an easy thing to do at all by any means, but you need to actually give a value to that which you're extracting and also you're polluting towards. You know, the carbon tax was a perfect example of where a value was placed on carbon emissions for a period of time. That's probably going to happen more and more as resources become more and more scarce and their availability means their price goes up. So it's actually factoring in the triple bottom line considerations, be they natural capital and social capital. We haven't talked about that tonight, but people, they're pretty important as well, into the decision-making process of businesses. And we're seeing that change actually at the moment. I'm seeing that change within some leading businesses.